Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, glad you're back on the Investigative Journal. Greg Anthony here on this February 1st, 2017 day on our calendar. First, my Jesuit quote of the day. And let me say this, when we think of events that have transpired in history over the last 100, 200, 300 years, there are certain events that stand out as ones of really great tragedy and horror. Just think in your mind what they are. One that comes to my mind is the World Trade Center in 2001, 9/11. And then if you go back a little farther, the sinking of the Titanic. Now, remember I said, if you look back in history, you'll find all these, top leaders, people of power talking against the Jesuits. They've been kicked out of more countries than Carter has pills. One they haven't been kicked out of is their prized possession, the United States. Now, as the years went on, there are many people out there who understand this story, but they don't seem to be people in power. They don't seem to be the princes, the kings, the presidents, and top people in government. They seem to be just average Joes, right? And many of these average Joes don't put their name to some of the quotes they give because maybe they fear reprisal. Well, here's one from such a researcher that said this: the greatest tragedies in the last 200 years can be traced to the Jesuits. We will not now show that the Jesuits planned and carried out the sinking of the Titanic, and we will show why they did it. So, I've done shows on this in the past. Go to that and Google Titanic Jesuit control, and you're going to see that they get their dirty little hands on most everything. Now, what I want to talk about today is ISIS, who created ISIS, and how it relates to 9/11. Isn't it interesting? 16 years have passed, and there's some real good 9/11 investigators out there, and I'll point out a couple that haven't put down the torch to tell people this was an inside job. The story the government gave you was so full of holes, it's like a piece of Swiss cheese. But as the years go by, they know this. People forget. It's kind of like the Kennedy assassination. Look back to the 60s now. Oh, yes, look back to the Lincoln assassination. The same thing. And let me say this. All those things I mentioned, you can bet the Jesuits had their dirty hand in it. Now, as far as 9/11, one little point you have to remember. What came after 9/11? The Patriot Act, which took away a lot of our rights in the idea of we have to fight this war on terror, and that means you're going to lose some of your privacy rights. Well, that, my friends, was written. It's a 300-page document. It was passed by Congress really quickly after 9/11. Many of them didn't even read it. I would say 99% of the congressmen and senators didn't read it because they were told to pass it. And guess where it was written? It was written prior to 9/11 at Georgetown University, penned by a Jesuit lawyer from Vietnam named Vinh Dinh. He was the main architect. So they had this thing in the works prior to 9/11. So you don't think they knew it was going to happen? Of course they did. So what I wanted to mention was, before I get to this subject, the main subject of the day, so to speak, let me talk about 2 points to clear off my desk. One is going to be the Supreme Court appointment yesterday by President Trump. And secondly, I wanted to update you on the Tony Alamo petition. A pastor, and I've covered this story in depth for over a decade, who's been in jail for now almost 10 years on charges that are so flimsy. That's another piece of Swiss cheese when you start looking at this case. And he should be out walking the streets. He should be out preaching the Bible, and he's sitting in jail. While so many of these presidential pardons, like Mark Rich, who was on the FBI 10 most wanted list back during the Clinton administration, and guess what happens? Right before he leaves office, he pardons him. And I can name a number of Obama pardons that are so outrageous compared to what this man is doing. And I hope Trump listens, because we're going to get this to the pardon attorney in Washington, D.C., and I'll comment on that in a minute. But first, Neil Gorsuch. Now, Neil Gorsuch was Trump yesterday wanted him to be our next Supreme Court justice. Now, a year ago, Antonin Scalia died, and he was a conservative judge. And the reason he wasn't replaced when Obama was president is because it happened during the primary season, and the Republicans rightfully said, listen, let's leave it up to the American people to choose the next Supreme Court justice. And they were right. So they did not listen to the appointee and even give a hearing to Judge Garland, who was appointed by Obama. Now, if you look back in history, there's never been a Supreme Court justice appointed during the last year of anyone's presidency, for that very same reason. So they left it up to the people. Now, if the Democrats would have won, they could have had their liberal judge there. But now we have Judge Gorsuch, who is a very conservative judge, and he's a judge from the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver, Colorado. He's 49 years old, so he'll be there a long time. A stellar educational background, graduated from Columbia with honors, Harvard Law School from honors, then went on to Oxford, received a PhD, so he has his JD. Then he gets a PhD in philosophy, which is very rare when it comes to Supreme Court justices. So I started looking, now being a law school graduate myself, I started looking at some of his opinions the other day. I knew he was going to be nominated. I thought he would be. So I looked at some of his opinions, and I read them. And he's a pretty good writer. Now, what I learned in law school was that most judges write terribly. Now, I look back at Justice Cardozo from years ago. Great writer. I used to love reading his opinions, but when you go through some of these Supreme Court justices, appeals court justices, writings, they're terrible. And one thing you got to learn in law school is you always go to the end of the case and read the holding, and then go back and read everything so you know where they're coming from. So you learn to read backwards in law school to save time. I didn't learn that till my second year. But one thing that I always looked at was, God, why do these guys write so terribly? They're smart people, but their writing was very difficult to read, and so you would struggle through some of these cases, pulling, it's like reading a bad novel. How long can you go? But you go and you do it, and you get through it. Issue, rule, holding, their opinion. So anyway, Gorsuch writes pretty well. Now he's a conservative, so I started looking. Now, it's interesting that everybody on the Supreme Court right now comes from the Ivy League. They're well-educated Harvard people. And I look back and I said, was there ever a justice that never went to law school? And we know that Abraham Lincoln was a pretty good lawyer. He never went to law school. And so what's this big deal? And I looked at it and I said, Robert Jackson, he was appointed by FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he held the United States Solicitor General office, the United States Attorney General office, and Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court, and he's the only person in United States history to have held all three offices without graduating from law school. Well, he's the only one to hold that office, law school or no law school. He was also the chief United States prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials. And amazingly, he never went to law school. Now, when you look at his background, and I found that interesting, so I started looking at how he went toe-to-toe with all these Ivy Leaguers, and I'll tell you, he wasn't a bad writer either. So maybe some of these Ivy League lawyers ought to learn how to write, and they get too caught up in their own ego. And so that's just my little opinion. Now we're going to look at Gorsuch will get he will get approved. He will be the next Supreme Court justice. And the only question is, can they get him in there before the next session opens? So he has to get in there by April. And that way he can rule on some important cases that are now being 4-4, going back to the appellate court, And there's a lot of environmental cases, and his vote will sway it the conservative way, what the people have voted for. And so it's important they get him in there before that. He will be nominated, and the Democrats will fight tooth and nail, but they have no way to win this case. So win this struggle that they will put up, of course. So let's remember that. So look at Gorsuch. It's Neil Gorsuch, and you'll find it quite interesting. Now, as a former law student, I find that you have to understand only two things about Gorsuch. Now, he's a textualist, and what that means in layman's terms is that when he reads the Constitution, he reads it literally, kind of like when you read the Bible literally. And what he says is he doesn't legislate from the bench. Now, many of the liberal lawyers, our liberal justices, especially in the last 30 to 40 years, use the court to make law. So when the progressives can't get their way in government, they legislate from the bench. Roe v. Wade is a good example. Should have never been passed. Now, the question of Roe v. Wade is that the federal government allows abortions all over the country. It should be left into the states' hands. That's exactly what will happen if there's ever a challenge to Roe v. Wade and the court becomes conservative. What will happen is it'll go back to the states will then rule, and that's where it should be at this point. We shouldn't have any money going to abortion. Trump just passed he just got rid of the Mexico City rule, which means that we spend money, taxpayer money, to fund abortions overseas. That's gone. We shouldn't have it here, because many of the people in this country believe in the right to life. Why should their tax money go automatically to abortions when they don't believe in it? So anyway, if there's not a challenge now in front of the court on Roe v. Wade, so when that happens, though, it'll go back to the states, and then of course what'll happen is the liberal states like California will rule in their way, and then other states won't. So that's the way I believe it should be. Okay. So we got that out of the way. Now, let's get to the petition to free Tony Alamo before I get to my main subject. Now, I've been doing this case for 10 years, and I am convinced that if he is given a fair shot with a pardon attorney in Washington, he will be released. So that's what we're going to try to do. Now, I feel comfortable in getting this case gathered and doing it as a law student without a law degree, or with a law degree but without being a member of the Bar Association. However, I will look for help from attorneys who want to get involved in this case. And I haven't said this before, so please think about this. I believe that would be a help. I also believe if I can't get somebody to work on this case, whether it be for exceedingly high fees, which I'll check out, or they don't want to get involved, I can present this, I think, in a very, 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 very structured manner so that they will look at this case and at the highest levels. So there we go. I'll be pursuing that. One, I have an attorney in mind. We're going to have to check out how much his fee will be. I'm convinced that if it's too high, we can't do it. But if it is something we can negotiate, it might get done. It could help. Anyway, I look at the best way we can get this done. And like I said, if I have to do it on my own, I will. And I think I'm capable of doing this. As a law, even though I didn't take the bar exam, as a law student and even after law school, I worked in workers' compensation law, where I did trials, hearings, depositions, everything a lawyer would do, and I think I did it very competently. I chose to go another way and not take the bar exam. I want to leave that for my later years in life. Something to do, instead of gardening. Can I pass the bar exam 10 years after graduating from law school? Everybody needs a personal goal. That's mine. Okay. Max, my dog here, Max, is getting used to listening to the show because he always went in the back. Because Moose, my other dog, who recently passed away, used to listen to the show. So Max now is forced to listen. And he he wasn't too interested, but now he is. Okay. So here we go. We're going to really get this done. And I explained it, how I want to look. First of all, I have an attorney in mind. If it's too high of a fee, we can't do it. Secondly, if we can't, I want to put this out there. Is there any attorneys out there who want to help me pro bono, or at least talk to me about it? 3, I'm perfectly capable of getting this done myself. So one way or another, we're going to get this done. And I'm waiting a little while now because, the dust hasn't settled in Washington right now. It's, people on the right are trying to get certain things done, lower taxes, which are needed. And the Democrats still have not understood they lost. And they can't accept Trump as their president, and they're acting like a bunch of babies, and the American people will suffer for it. But the Jesuits love that, this chaos in government. But anyway, back to Tony Alamo before I get on with my main topic. There's a website, TonyAlamo.com, or freeTonyAlamo.com, that we started. Go there, read about it. It'll give you an overview. Go to my articles. Go to TonyAlamoMinistries.com. Can read about their story. Also read what the press did. Trump says the press are the most, and he's right, dishonest people, the mainstream dishonest people in the world. They're right. They were so dishonest with the Alamo case, most people believe he's a child abuser when he's not. And so don't believe what you're going to read from ABC, CBS, and all those stories that still linger on the net. And if there's anybody with courage, a lawyer out there with courage that wants to help me, let me know. But anyway, go to that, TonyAlamo.com. At the top of the page, you can click on the petition, sign it. We have a whole bunch of people. I'm going to include all of their comments and the people that have come forward talking about this man. Recently, Miguel R. from Texas said, he's a very decent man, the most decent man I ever met in my life by his testimony. I got saved, and in the years of knowing Tony, I've never seen him do what he was accused of. And I'm a living witness of that, so I believe that he's a man of God and that he deserves to be free to keep on preaching the gospel of our Lord Jesus. To this lost and dying world, he brings the gospel of Jesus Christ, just like it's written in the Word of God. Praise the Lord. I believe that he was incarcerated because he was bringing in the gospel to the lost and dying world. Cut and dry, as the Word of God says. He doesn't compromise with the Word of God. He says it just like it is written in the Word of God, and I believe he has the Spirit of living God in him. Praise the Lord. Now, Neil Gorsuch, who's the new Supreme Court nominee, believes in the same thing, reading the Constitution literally. He believes in the right of life. He believes in reading it as it is written. There's a comparison there, right? All right. So here we go. We have to get to the subject. And boy, did I go on. So I only got like 6 minutes here in the, 6 minutes here in the first half hour. But don't worry, we have some time in the second half hour. There's always another day, folks, isn't there? Always another day. At least when we're living here, there's another day. And when we're not, there's going to be a whole eternity of days. Got a lot to look forward to. So here's what I'm saying. We got to talk about ISIS. Got to talk about it truthfully. Where did it come from? Who funded it? All the questions that they don't want to talk about today, like they did at 9/11. Looking back to 9/11, which took 2 years out of my life, I researched it. I spent a lot of my time talking to the victims. I was in New York many times, sat in with victim meetings with the 9/11 Commission, listened to them, and I found one thing about the victims of the 9/11 at the World Trade Center. Many of them disagreed. I would say 90% of them disagreed with the government findings, but that fell on deaf ears. Now, I also spoke to the victims of the people in the airplanes. And boy, that was such an interesting discussion with these people because, man, a lot of things they said were weird and didn't make sense to me and almost made me think like these people actually weren't in the plane and they were used. You know, it was very interesting when you when you start looking at 9/11 and all the God, all the things that don't make sense in the 9/11 Commission report, all the things that were hidden. This was the beginning of the war on terror. This is the beginning of the Jesuit plot to change the West, to change America. And now 16 years later, very few people talk about it. There are some 9/11 people out there that still do. One I have to talk about is Phil Jahan, who's a personal friend of mine, and we spent time together when he was researching 9/11 in the beginning days, 2004, 2005. He's continued with a website called letsrollforums.com. It used to be letsrollsomething.org, but it's letsrollforums.com. And he's done some really great stuff over the years. He hasn't forgotten about it. Go to that website. You get a lot of information, enough to keep you busy for a long time. But anyway, Phil's a straight shooter. When I was researching 9/11, and in New York many times, I ran into a lot of controlled opposition people who were not, they were there to lead you astray. And I met a lot of those people. Some of them I didn't realize at the time. And one I think was Willie Rodriguez, the supposed last man out of 9/11, of the World Trade Centers, who was supposedly the janitor that was the last man out and told this harrowing story. And in fact, I spent 10 days with Willie. I was at his apartment when he was just about to get married, and I believed him hook, line, and sinker. Phil Jahan has researched a lot more deeply than I did at the time, and I'm glad. I was going to write a book about Willie, and I'm glad things fell apart and I didn't, because there's a lot of evidence now that he is someone put there to tell a story that never happened, a plant. He also received some medal from the White House. But the one question I never asked, and boy was I stupid. Sometimes you look back, you get caught up in everything. There were so many people to interview. I should have asked him this, but I believed him so much. Can you show me your pay stubs? He said he worked there 20 years. Show me your pay stubs. Prove to me that this is the position you held. Now, I never asked that. Phil Jahan did years later, and you go to his website and read about Willie Rodriguez. That'll tell you how difficult it is to get to the truth when they put in these controlled opposition people to thwart you from getting the truth. But I spent a couple years researching and came to my own conclusions. I didn't make a decision on whether 9/11 was an inside job or not until I researched it thoroughly for 2 years. And so I was confident when I said the government's story was full of holes and couldn't be true. I was comfortable in saying that I researched it myself with my own eyes, talked to the people, as many as I could, and to this day realized that that was the beginning. ISIS now is just another of their tools they're using to bring down the West, to rip this country apart. And so we have to look at ISIS the same way that we looked at 9/11. Okay, does it make sense? Who's controlling it? Where's the money coming from? There's even a representative, I believe, in Congress now has put a bill in that we should not fund terrorism in Syria anymore. Give money to these rebel groups, and then they morph into these terrorist groups. Well, it proves that the money's coming from the West. But who are the connections? What's making this all work together? Making Islam the enemy against the West. Is it a plot? Yes, it's been done before in the 600s. When they created Islam, when the Vatican created Islam, wrote the Quran, and propped up Muhammad as this prophet. And if you read the Quran, I'm not a scholar in the Quran. I've read a lot of it because it makes sense to me to understand what it's about. It's a very, very brutal. And listen, they want to kill infidels. Now we have these moderates that say they don't follow that. But how can they? It's kind of the same thing. Do you read the Quran literally? And if you do, you'll find it's a very violent religion, bent on turning the whole world into Muslims. Doesn't sound right to me. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. you will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Hey, we are back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on this February 1st. Not my favorite month of the year. I've always hated February. First, how to spell it. When I was in school, I couldn't spell February. What's that R doing there? You know? And then I said February? Why did they say February if there's an R there? Plus, it's always mixed me up. It's the only, you never know how many days. And it's a short month. And so at the end of the month, you're going, okay, I got 3 more days, and then there's no more days. So I never liked February. We should get rid of it. Get another month. Spell it right, at least. Okay. Anyway, back to the serious side of life. Well, how about this? One more little aside, just to get away from, too much serious thing. It can build up, And so even occasionally I start thinking, today I was starting thinking, what do you do when you're waiting on the telephone? For example, when you're on the telephone, waiting for somebody says, wait, I got to do something. I got to call. So you're sitting there. I start singing, songs. And some of my 3 most favorite songs to sing, and I'll do this sometimes when I'm walking, icing, Johnny Yuma was a rebel. He roamed through the land. You know, Johnny Yuma, my favorite song to sing when I'm waiting on the phone. There's other ones. When I was singing today was Here I Come to Save the Day, Mighty Mouse is on its way. Those are a couple of my favorites. But anyway, let's get back to the serious side of life. Okay. You know, it's really fun. In a sense, it's really exciting when you start reading the Bible and putting all this stuff together. So we're talking about who created Islam. Why was 9/11 really there? And it's, you know, the questions you have to ask was, why was Islam created? Why Muhammad was chosen? The creation of the Quran. Islam and Catholicism similarities. And then you start looking at the fifth trumpet of Revelation 9. Could that be representing the rise of Islam? Muslim and Catholic battles. The sixth trumpet of Revelation. All of this stuff. What an exciting thing to do, because it all makes sense. And I don't think you can get to really understand all this stuff without an understanding of the Bible. Now, what I've also found interesting is all these diplomats and all these important people now converting to Catholicism, a pagan religion, my religion, the one I grew up in. I know it's pagan when you start looking at the ceremonies. Newt Gingrich, remember Newt, the Speaker of the House? The guy who balanced the budget, he just converted to Catholicism. Tony Blair, after he got out of office in England, Catholicism. So there's this triumvirate. London, Washington, D.C., the Vatican. We've talked about that triumvirate and how it all makes sense. You know, the ISIS obelisks representing each of those cities I mentioned. That's just a couple things. So this is exciting. It's not something to be looked at as it's understanding. And so when I talk this way, it's there's a lot of facts here. Now, 9/11, folks, was a false flag event. And let's just make some generalizations here that justified this never-ending war against a foreign enemy. Now, I was looking at a quote, somebody pointed it out to me, by James Madison, President James Madison. And is it becoming reality? He said, if tyranny and oppression come to this land, it will be in the guise of fighting a foreign enemy. Okay, so the enemy right now, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, is this to bring tyranny to America, to all countries in the world? It appears that way. 9/11 was that event that justified this never-ending war against a foreign enemy. And still to this day, if you go to Fox, CNN, all these left and right TV stations that are out there spouting opinion, they consider 9/11 truthers to be persona non grata. People who shouldn't even be living in America. How could you talk about that story being an inside job? Well, my goodness. They're using time and this kind of idea. Look, Americans now are so convinced, watching these video games all the time, they can't remember what happened yesterday, let alone 16 years ago. So you're getting that kind of forgetfulness. 9/11 is something that should stay solid in your mind and never stop doing I always do about maybe 2 or 3 minutes a day on 9/11 just to keep my so I don't forget it. If you don't use your mind, you're going to lose it. Correct? That's why my goal, my own you got to have a personal goal outside of all the things you do. Now think of your own life. Mine is to pass the bar exam. Yes. And one of my good friends, and let me tell you why it's so crazy. I wish I lived in a time where you didn't even have to go to law school. I'd have made a great lawyer. It's all these stumbling blocks. Even my own family. I went to a school that doesn't have the prestige of Berkeley. Now I have a niece who's in Berkeley Law School. She's probably one of the few liberals in my family, and I love her. But for some reason, there's this idea, and she's young, And she doesn't give, you can kind of sense when I go to family meetings, oh, Greg's, yeah, he's graduated from law school, but he can't be smart because it wasn't really a good law school. And what I mean by good is it wasn't in that, oh, I watched my family go through torture. Oh, she got into Berkeley. She's got to get to the best. And they were going through all these statistics on when she could get a better job. More people from Berkeley make $25,000 a year more than people from this school that she got into. And I'm going, man, are they losing the point? And I love my family. But I never went to law school for that reason. In fact, the first time I went to law school was when I was 21. And then I finished a year and got my job as a journalist, and I split because I wanted to be a journalist. Then after my time in Rome, realizing that I chose a profession that was completely not what I thought it was, after I learned what I learned in Rome, I couldn't get it published anywhere. I decided to get out of journalism. I said, well, what the hell? I'll go to law school. I didn't go for money. Never did. And I can't understand it. Maybe it's just a different way of thinking. But anyway, so I don't get any credit from my family even. I sit down and they don't realize I understand the Constitution. And I don't even, in fact, I'm going through a period of time now where I'm not even going to talk to my niece. I'm going to let her go. I tried to give her some advice about how to get through law school, and she kind of looked at me with glazed eyes like, yeah, Uncle Greg, sure. Yeah, he believes that 9/11's an inside job. Okay. So anyway, just my little aside on my family. So we have personal goals too, and mine is I am going to show that I'm going to pass the bar just to see if I can do it. Okay, and I've got, what better thing to do than to do something you like in your older age, right? When you're older. Got to pass the time some way. And I remember maybe this is what was distant. My tutor in law school was the oldest man ever to pass the bar and graduate from law school in the history of California. Harry was his name. And Harry passed the bar when he was 88 years old, became a teacher. And he went to law school. He was a physicist because he was bored, and he went to law school, my law school, with his daughter. So don't tell me that you have to go to an Ivy League school. Ask Robert Jackson, the justice. Ask Abraham Lincoln when you get to eternity. Ask them what they think. But anyway, back to 9/11. Let me check the time here. Finding this to be an exciting day to talk about this stuff, because it is exciting. Remember this, those three buildings. So we got the war on terror started with 9/11. That justified everything, right? Even though they created it. It was brought about by tyranny, an inside job, oppression to the people. And these three buildings, when you look at that, collapsed that day. That's the two towers in Building 7, not to mention the hole in the Pentagon that was like a dartboard. It was like a dart hit it, and then they said an airplane went through the wall. It's incredible. People will believe anything. Now, the three buildings collapsed that day did not fall because of the brilliance and the great strategy of these Muslim terrorists. It was the work of Jesuits through the CIA, Israel, Mossad, and both of which they control. Now, let me give you a personal story. About a year before 9/11, I had a friend. I believe I was in law school, at the time. And I was selling RVs with my buddy, who's still a buddy of mine, Bill McIntyre. And do you realize? He had his notes. We always took notes of who our customers were. Guess what? The biggest 9/11 terrorist and a couple of his buddies came to our RV center to buy an RV a year before 9/11. So you think that they weren't being controlled by the FBI? So they're here in America a year before, and they want to buy an RV. Go back to some of my old stories to find out about that. Muhammad Atta came to the RV center I worked with, was one of my best friend's customers. He wrote it down, and you're telling me that these guys weren't controlled by somebody, that they were here buying RVs without any kind of surveillance or anything? Come on. Now, It's also interesting to note that, listen to what David Rockefeller said. He said this in 1994. We are on the verge of global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis and the nations will accept the New World Order. Wow! Could that be 9/11? Of course. Well, here's what I want to do. I found a 5-minute video, very general. I'm sure you're tired of listening to my voice right now. That kind of explains 9/11 in a nutshell, just to refresh your memory, to show where we're at. Now, I have gone over, so tomorrow I'm going to talk more about Father Dal Oglio, the father of ISIS, a Jesuit priest, I call him, and much more the money connections that get overlooked. Same thing. ISIS, where did it come from? You can trace it. They don't want you to do that because it's an inside job as well. But let's listen to this 5-minute clip to refresh your memory on 9/11. Okay, there'll be a little music in the background here.
September 11th, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York, while in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon in the budget analyst office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts, and those who harbor them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her, and her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about...
His head could be seen to move violently forward.
And...
They took the babies out of the incubators.
And...
Mobile production facilities.
And...
The rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit, paranoid, tinfoil, dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever.
Okay, I recommend every day, if you don't want to forget about 9/11, do a little bit of research, 5-10 minutes back, and you'll find some really good things done in the last 5 years. Researchers will really get to the bottom, but everybody's ears are closing to that story, and we're on to the next Jesuit plot. So, listen, 9/11, really in the hearts of most Americans, made Muslims the enemy of America. And why don't we remember the book of Revelation? Read Revelation 13, and you'll find that the Jesuits are and the Vatican are the beast in that portion of the Bible. In order for the Jesuits of Rome to take control of the world, they have to control leaders, money, and you see how they had their hands in the Federal Reserve. And since 9/11, they have placed these puppet leaders and created a Jesuit Rothschild central bank, like the Federal Reserve, in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, all places that the U.S. military has intervened, correct? Yeah. I mean, they're moving that. Remember the Federal Reserve back 1913, I believe? Changed our world, financial world. They control it. Now, they steal resources. Remember Trump was saying we should have got the oil? Well, who's getting the oil there? And the poppy production in Afghanistan. Remember I talked about that? That's where all the opium is coming from. That's where the drugs are. We have military members go there, and they're not fighting anybody. They're protecting these fields. For what? So they can continually get their drug money and create, and use it to fund ISIS. And you can bet that America and Israel will continue, and Syria and Iran to make war, as those countries, are still teetering with Jesuit control. Maybe that's one reason why Clinton went in and botched that with Assad. You never know. There's so much going on. The Jesuits control these radical terrorist groups. Now, Al-Qaeda, a network of Muslims, trained, armed, funded by the West, by the Jesuits, through the CIA, the Mossad. They use Al-Qaeda to create unrest in countries like Libya. They use ISIS to create unrest all over the world. And we did some stories showing that Jesuit Priest Fr Dal Oglio is a key figure in Syria. And we'll do a bigger story on him tomorrow because I don't have much time today. And I wanted to mention this. Shortly before this guy's untimely death, former British Foreign Secretary Robin Cook told this to the House of Commons. The truth is, there's no Islamic army or terrorist group called Al-Qaeda, and any informed intelligence officer knows this. But there is a propaganda campaign to make the public believe in the presence of an identified entity representing the devil only in order to drive the TV watcher to accept a unified international leadership for a war against terrorism. The country behind the propaganda is the U.S., and the lobbyists for the U.S. war on terror are only interested in making money. Now, What did CIA defense contractor Stephen Kelly say? Quote, "This is a completely fabricated enemy. The funding is completely from the United States and its allies. And for people to think that this enemy is something that needs to be attacked in Syria or Iraq is a farce. Because obviously this is something that we created. We control, and now it has become inconvenient for us to attack this group as a legitimate enemy." So these people from the inside are telling you the construct, telling you who created this enemy. It goes back to 9/11. And one thing you have to remember is this. The Jesuits control the radical terrorists called ISIS, and that the Vatican used to openly cause people they deemed as heretics, mostly true followers of Christ, to be killed the same way during the Dark Ages and the Inquisition. Now, these Jesuits do it covertly by having the CIA, the U.S. military, train and arm the ISIS rebels. Father Dal Oglio, who we'll talk about again tomorrow, there to make sure it all works, to carry out this next Inquisition. Now, of course, these radical Muslims that are getting paid to do this are being used and can be said to be evil. But who controls them? This would have never happened without the Jesuits. In fact, this would have never happened back in the 600s when Christians were killed by the millions by Muhammad if they didn't create him and the Quran and Islam. Now, no one in the highest levels of government will ever say this. But Obama did say one thing. ISIS isn't Islamic. He wasn't lying. Now, he may have had a different meaning, but he wasn't lying. ISIS is a creation of the Jesuits of Rome to carry out their Inquisition and to kill those who are followers of Christ. Simple, to the point, and the only question is, are there any people with courage that are willing to come forward? More people like the two I mentioned, one who died suddenly after he made that statement to the House of Commons, to enlighten the American people on where the real enemy is. That's the missing story, the missing link, the thing we need to understand. And I appreciate any comments. Call or email gregbeacon@gmail.com. And listen, folks, we'll be back tomorrow, God willing, and the creek don't rise. See you tomorrow on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, the rapture will be canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.